All right. Hi, everybody. We're back for week 3 of Best Of.
What did you again? Here we are.
We're getting better and better at these intros. So this week, this was Jared's pick. Why didn't you tell us why?
Yeah. So Dr. Lauren Fogel Mersy, we have a cool conversation. She is trained in like the Gottman Institute, which for people who don't know, we get into it in the episode, but very like research-based, awesome kind of theoretical view of healthy relationships. And it's funny, the past couple best ofs are people that one of us has had crushes on. And like this one, I feel like Dr. Lauren is like one of my top guests ever for like people I want to be friends with. Don't you just want to like have coffee with her like every 2 weeks or something like that?
Yeah, she's super fucking cool. And you know what? She was so like, she posted our episode like on her website. Like she was so gracious and she's got a shit ton of followers. And just to be so humble and come on our show and like offer us some like her wisdom, I'm just so grateful for her.
Yeah, she's awesome.
Yeah. All right, guys. So enjoy this episode and we'll see you next week.
And then, the other tail, the other 2.5% on the other side is going to be amazing sex. That was great. That was, phenomenal. It was, noteworthy. And so there's going to be this range, and there is no 100% of the time mind-blowing sex. And in fact, even knowing that sort of is more of a tail end, that sort of spectacular, knock your socks off kind of sex is maybe more of the exception than the norm. The norm is going to be, we had a good time.
Hi, guys. Welcome back.
I'm here too. Leanna, I've been really practicing our intros.
Yeah. I'm Leanna, if you're new.
I'm Jared.
And we just finished recording with our guest today.
Yeah, super fun interview.
Dr. Lauren Fogel Mersy. She is so intelligent, so on point, so poised. She's amazing.
Yeah, she's so also nice and smart and
punctual.
Yes. So Canadian.
It's very Canadian.
In all the best ways. Like she's just friendly and warm and relatable.
Yes. So we love her. The interview was fantastic. We talk a lot about a specific type of therapy used for couples. And then we also go into sex therapy and some common sexual issues that can come up in relationships or individually.
Yes. And then Leanna and I ask about all of our sexual dysfunctions.
And she kindly gives us advice.
There was like, when we shifted to that part, there was a moment where we both threw long questions at her that were just all about us. And I felt like her eyes got a little big and she was like, okay, here we go. No, and she was lovely. She nailed it. She killed it.
Yeah. So anyway, we're gonna try and keep this intro short.
Yes, let's go.
Okay, but we want to talk about a couple of our sponsors, including a new sponsor. But Jared is going to take us off first with V-Fresh.
Okay, our first sponsor is V-Fresh. That's VEE Fresh. V-Fresh empowers women by making vaginal health easy with effective natural selections delivered right to your door. With products such as V-Cleanse, a boric acid suppository to get rid of any BV, that's bacterial vaginosis.
Yes.
And yeast and maintain healthy pH. V-Tract, an oral supplement to get rid of UTIs and maintain healthy urinary function. And V-Gentle, a wash that helps balance vaginal pH. Go to www.veefresh.com and use our new code HELLO2021 to get 10% off. And if you need it, visit helloandgoodbye.com for links to all of our sponsors, as well as our YouTube channel.
Helloandgoodbyepodcast.com.
Oh, I blew it.
Yeah.
I did such a good read right up until then. Helloandgoodbyepodcast.com.
Yeah. No, that was great.
Hey, thanks.
Good job. So I swear by V-Fresh. I use the boric acid suppositories twice a week. It helps prevent me from getting infections, and just so many women love this product. So by the way, I did try using the discount code. You do not have to capitalize it.
Oh, good to know.
You can just be Hello 2021. Okay. So go get your VFresh now. And then our new sponsor is Ioba Toys. So IOBA, Ioba Toys. So Ioba Toys sells sex toys, but they are so much more than that. Their goal is to empower those with a vagina by helping to destigmatize both masturbation and the topic of sex in general, because female empowerment is feeling confident as fuck in your body. Their Oh My G is the world's quietest G-spot vibrator with a true come hither finger motion that brings you those toe curling orgasms. It has reviews such as Who Needs a Man, Spread the Oh My Gospel, and This Was a New Type of Orgasm. So to get your Oh My G vibrator, you're going to go to www.iobatoys.com, IOBA, and use code HELLO and GOODBYE to receive 30% off your order.
Ooh, 30% off.
30% off. So again, www.iobatoys.com, use HELLO and GOODBYE to receive 30% off. And like Jared said, all of the links to our sponsors are on our website, www.helloandgoodbyepodcast.com, with all of this information as well. And I actually just updated it. Yeah. And it's cute. Like underneath, like each sponsor has like a picture of us on top of it. And like there's like a little caption. And under the one in the middle, it says, Hello and Goodbye, servicing all your holes. Yes. Okay, so that takes care of our sponsors, but I did want to do a quick reminder for rating and reviewing. Okay. So here's the thing with reviewing on Apple Podcasts. If the reviews become like, if they start to drop off, the show is going to become stagnant because Apple stops sharing it. So if you guys can be super consistent about going over there and writing a review for us, we would so appreciate that. You just go to Apple Podcasts, click and search Hello and Goodbye, scroll down, hit write a review. We have a new review contest now. I think it ends on February. I don't remember what I said on Instagram. I think like February 20th. I think it ends on February 20th. Anyway, so you have till February 20th. Go write a funny, creative, sincere review, and the winner gets a Hello and Goodbye mug, the last Hello and Goodbye mug available. Wow. Yeah, because I'm not ordering I'm not ordering more until you guys start paying for them. So if you want the last Hello and Goodbye mug, go over there, write us a review, share with your friends. Guys, everything that you can do to help us out keeps the show going. And we really appreciate you.
Yes, we deeply appreciate all the support.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, let's get into our updates.
Let's do it.
You want to go first?
Okay. So I left a cliffhanger last week,
You did leave a cliffhanger.
So I talked to my partner, and we had a couple conversations throughout the week. It was really good. I think it was a good sort of point for us because, like, some of both of our stuff came up. And it's like, you know, like the only way out is through. Like, you have to go through that stuff if you're going to continue to get to know each other and deepen a relationship or whatever. So it's interesting because in the interview that everyone's about to hear, we talked, Dr. Lauren talked about what was she saying? Like kind of like doing that approaching versus the distancing and whatever. And so
like the soft approach, like if you have a complaint, making it soft instead of a criticism. But it was also
the thing which we were talking about, like the pursuer and like that whole thing.
Oh, yeah. Like there's always going to be like, well, yeah, you guys will hear it.
Anyway, some of my stuff got triggered and I approached my partner and I said, hey, I felt like some of my stuff got triggered and I wanted to just share that with you right away because I need to do that. Because if I don't, right, then I'm just going to start pulling away, right? And that probably wasn't the best softest approach, especially like knowing some of what my partner's past has been like and stuff. And so she got a little like scared by that, but what was really cool is actually we like talked a couple times through the week, and like at some points, I think we both got like a little flustered or overwhelmed, but we sort of like worked through some stuff. And it was really, like, I feel like I understand her a lot more now. And I think she understands me a lot more now, because like, it's so easy to fucking misread people, man. So I don't know. Am I being too vague?
No.
Ask me questions.
Yeah, well, I mean, it makes me think of in the episode with Dr. Morgan on setting boundaries and navigating conflict. I think it's like episode 35. But she talked about how when you stop being curious about how your partner feels, like that's when you're in trouble.
Yep.
And you know, just experiencing that in my most recent relationship where I feel like I really tried to understand and set aside my ego, and I was not perfect at it, but I really tried, and I was really proud of myself that I was able to kind of change the way that I showed up.
Yep.
And it's hard to practice that.
Yeah.
It's really hard to practice that when you feel hurt and you don't want to understand why your partner feels hurt because you feel hurt.
Yeah.
You know, and so I guess that's kind of how I'm interpreting what happened.
And it's like, it's really interesting because you both have to sort of take turns. Okay, let me just be with what you're saying and how you're feeling hurt. And then then at some point though, it has to be my turn where you can hear how I'm feeling hurt, right?
Yes. Well, and that's what I always said to my last partner was, hey, listen, like right now, like I came to you with this. Right now, I really need you to try and hear me. And then I am more than happy I want to hear you then. But right now, like I feel like I need to be heard right now. And can you do that first? And then we can... And
then you can give me your complaints?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And again, like maybe that isn't the best way to say it. I don't know. But I mean, I think the biggest thing is like we all just suck at it. We all suck at it, but we're doing the best we can.
Yes.
We're doing the best we can. And that's what we always say on the show. Like, we're not experts. We're doing the best we can. Sometimes we have no idea what we're doing.
Yep.
You and I I wouldn't say that our relationships have been unsuccessful. I think we've had successful relationships, but we just haven't found a lifetime partner yet.
Yep.
And so every relationship, you and I are at the point where we're using it to try and grow as people.
Yes. And I think, and what was cool about the interview that's coming up, we talked about both like just those relational dynamics, and we talked about the sort of sex and intimacy dynamics. And I think what was nice is my partner and I, like, after having all this deep conversation this week, then when we saw each other this weekend, it was like, it took some time, where I think me more than her actually was like still a little walled off, and I think by sort of talking and then, we were able to kind of like reconnect in that way, and like, because it takes me time to get back into my body in that way and be comfortable in that way. And so, so it was nice.
Yeah, well, good. Well, I'm proud of you.
Hey, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm proud of me too, and of us. It's really interesting because both me and my partner are people that have past trauma, and sort of learning about like how the other person interprets certain things you do and say, what things trigger them, and then for me, it was like a big eye-opener that, like, when she's in this triggered place, the lens that she filters everything through is, like, so strong, And I'm like, wait, I said all these, like, nice things to reassure you, and yet somehow, like, your brain interpreted that as me, like, threatening to leave. It's like, it's really interesting. And that's good information for me to, like, try to... like know what's happening with her in the moment, and then be a little bit more like thoughtful about how I'm wording things and reassuring and stuff like that. So.
I have a little bit of that. I have a hard time, like that has happened with a few guys in the past where they say something really nice and then follow it with but and something that makes me feel threatened that they're leaving me.
Oh, interesting.
And so I get that.
Yeah.
I get that. Remember with Denver guy? It's been a long time since we talked about Denver guy.
That was a big
Denver guy was episode 8. Yeah, and he came up again at episode 15. But that's what happened with him. We had this amazing date, night, whatever. And then the next day he was saying, you're this amazing human being. But remember what I said about you flying out to come see me? Yeah, I just don't. And then I was like, So I get that.
Yeah,
I get that.
Sure.
But anyway, we know we have our own stuff, and it's really important to stay curious about your partner's stuff.
I love that. That's the perfect encapsulation way to bring back Dr. Morgan.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
You're welcome.
What's happening in your life?
Well, I guess I have not talked about this yet. I have teased that I have a new job, but let's go ahead and talk about what my new job is.
Speaking of
Dr. Morgan, she asked me to come on her team to be essentially a part of one of the women on her team that jumps on the calls with those who are interested in the program and helps them decide if it's the right program for them.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I think you'd be awesome at that because you're someone who got a lot out of the program and you're just incredibly personable, and I think it's going to be an awesome fit.
It's really, there's only 5 of us on the team. Her program is growing so rapidly. She's so amazing. It's nothing but positive female support. I've had a lot of training calls, and I'm ready to start setting up meetings and setting up calls. And it's something I'm nervous by because I've never done anything like that. I mean, I've always sold myself, right? I sell my yoga, I sell my piano. Actually, I've never marketed for piano ever. But I sell myself when we're dating. We all sell ourselves, so, but this is a little different. This is I did probably 10 hours of training online and watching videos. And, but yeah, I just feel really grateful that I was given this opportunity, that she believed in me enough. And it's something I can do from home. It's a great financial opportunity, depending on how much effort I put into it. And I can't express how amazing the program is.
Yeah.
Because I believe in it. Because I did it and it was life-changing.
Yes.
So all that to say, if you guys are interested, hit me up. She is offering our listeners 10% off of the program.
So do you want to give people just a quick rundown of what is the program, who it might be good for?
Yeah. So the program is for women who basically anybody who wants to learn more about their attachment style, how that looks within their relationships, how to rewire your personal beliefs, your relationship beliefs, kind of looking at past situations that are part of what you do believe about yourself in relationships. And then just the work of working through that and becoming more cognizant of what you want to be moving forward, what you're capable of, what you're worthy of. The program is called ESL, Empowered, Secure, and Loved. And so the goal is to get to a place where you believe that you can be empowered, secure, and loved.
Oh, that's perfect.
And, it's really it's a group of, it's 4 modules in a row, and each module is something different. And by the 4th module, you've done kind of the work, and then you get to learn how to approach dating or how to approach relationships and have things like pacing and boundaries. And, so it's really, and then not only that, you get a one-on-one coaching call with Dr. Morgan, and then more coaching calls as needed. There's a weekly group call that's so amazing, having other women there to support you as well. You don't have to be single to do the program. I cannot promote it enough.
Yeah. Well, and I know for you, right, you were in a place in your life where you were seeing a lot of the same patterns repeat in your dating life and relationships not working out, and just all of these things being really painful and sort of you not getting what you wanted out of this side of your life. And that just doing this program transformed all of that.
Yeah, and even more than that, not even really believing that I deserved it. you know?
Wow.
And I think, you know, even though my ex and I had our stuff, I think that that was a really great relationship for me to do post-program because it helped me put into practice all of the things that I learned.
Beautiful.
You know?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you guys want to know more about that, send me an email, info@helloandgoodbyepodcast.com, or you can DM me on Instagram too, @helloandgoodbyepodcast.
Awesome.
In terms of my personal week, I'm still recovering from the breakup.
Mm-hmm.
I have my good and bad days. This new job has been a great distraction.
Oh, yeah.
Just kind of pouring myself into that. I'm dealing with some physical issues. I know you guys, I told you I have a herniation in my neck. I am getting surgery on February 19th. So it's nice to have that date in place, something to look forward to. And then I'm pretty sure I have a stomach ulcer.
Oh, no.
It's really hard to eat. So I think the one positive about breakups is you usually lose weight.
Sure.
And I mean, not saying that you have to lose weight, that's always a positive thing. But
Yeah.
I had put on some COVID weight and I was having a hard time getting rid of it.
And holiday. And when you're in a
holiday.
relationship, you tend to nest a little more.
And I prefer to be at a different size because I just like the way my clothes fit a little better. So anyway, I'm pretty much there.
Hey, you know, I mean, sometimes when you're going through something like a breakup, you got to find the silver linings, right?
Well, I have one quick question for you before we go into our interview. I was thinking about this. Bush or no bush?
Oh, good question. I don't have a strong preference. I've had, partners who have, who are completely shaved versus, I mean, my only preference is, I think, for everybody, male, female, non-binary, like any person, like keep yourself like groomed and kind of clean and, don't be like unkempt.
Yeah.
But it's hard because sometimes, I don't know, like sometimes sometimes there can be like a stubble thing that doesn't, that like, I don't know. Like, and I also think whatever's comfortable for the person. It makes
What do you
them
mean the
feel good.
stubble thing?
Well, where like, sometimes like it can be like a little like rough if
I see. If it's like growing
shaves
back.
and then grows back and like whatever.
Okay, yeah. Well, men's beards are like that too.
I know.
Like my chin chafes. Or no, my nose, hold on.
Like upper lip.
Yeah, upper lip,
like,
yeah. Like
so,
when I'm first starting to see someone.
Yeah, women who are really fair, sometimes they like get like all red.
I know.
From, like, making out with a guy who has stubble. Yeah.
So actually I prefer full beards.
Oh.
Because then I don't
it's
get
softer.
that.
Yeah. Interesting.
I'm not doing anything about that situation for a long time.
Good for you.
I'm like, I have no one to impress.
Yep.
It is a pain in the butt. I get ingrown hairs. I use an electric shaver, so then I have to do it like every few days. Mm-hmm. And waxing is like, it's not super expensive, but it hurts.
Yep.
And like, there's no reason to do it right now.
Yeah.
So I was just thinking about that today. I'm like, I wonder what your preference is.
Well,
I personally like hair on guys. I don't like I like, it's sexy to me that it's like a man has like hair. But I mean, like you said, not like a ton.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want like a thicket down there.
Exactly.
Well, and I don't know, and it would be interesting. Like, I don't know that I think if I had a partner who's like, my pubic hair is left alone, like I'm all natural, it's how it grows, like blah, blah, blah. I don't think I would have a problem with it. I think I'd be like, okay.
Yeah, I think I would.
I guess it would be, I guess you might be
what
like,
it looks like.
yeah, and like, if you're going to go down there, like how much is it?
Well, right, exactly.
In your face and in your mouth.
Because if you let it fully go, it can be a lot. All right, guys. Well, we're so excited for this interview. We kept the intro short.
Yes.
Woo! And we'll see you guys at the end. Enjoy.
Bye.
Our next guest is a clinical psychologist and certified sex therapist practicing in Minneapolis, Minnesota. She specializes in sexual health issues such as low sexual desire, libido mismatches in relationships, arousal difficulties, orgasm difficulties, and sexual pain. She is also trained in Gottman method couples therapy to help people improve their relationships. We are so happy to have you on, Dr. Lauren Fogel Mersy.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. We chatted a little bit before this, and I think I'm the most excited for this conversation for myself.
She's like, I have lots of questions about my personal issues.
So, usually we go into the, how did you get into this? But I thought maybe we could just what is your favorite part about your job right now?
I think the most rewarding part, and it's been that way from the beginning for me, is just watching people make progress. And unfortunately, that's not always the case. Some people, if it's not the right fit for them or they need a different approach, certainly that happens. But watching people make progress and, seeing those aha moments in real time is just so rewarding and so fulfilling. And getting to bear witness to that is just so much a privilege for me that I find it really, it reinforces all the work that I put into the work that I do.
I love that. I think both Jared and I have a lot of struggle and trauma in this area. Sex has always been an issue in all of my relationships because of trauma. So I want to get into just kind of some basic questions so our listeners can learn, and then we can share some of our own struggles too.
Yeah, then we'll hijack the interview just so that we can get some answers to what we need to work on.
So can you explain to us the Gottman theory that you use to work with your clients?
Mm-hmm. I really want you to explain the Four Horsemen, and I'm going to watch Leanna's face as you do it, because I'm a little familiar and she's not, so I can't wait.
Okay. Yeah. So the Gottman method is an approach to couples therapy or relationship therapy that was founded by doctors John and Julie Gottman. So that's where the Gottman name comes from. And it's one of the evidence-based approaches to partner and couples therapy. And it's based on a lot of John Gottman's research over 40 plus years, both research with couples from sessions and also in a laboratory setting, hooking people up to equipment, measuring their physiology. It's a really complex research process that he's undergone over several years, over decades. And so what he's found through his research is just fascinating. And he's famous for this concept that you mentioned, Jared, called the Four Horsemen, which is these 4 relational patterns that can emerge in relationships that, if not sort of, reined in, can wreak havoc. And he named them the Four Horsemen after a biblical reference. The Four Horsemen in the Bible is supposed to mean like the sign of the end of times. And so the Four Horsemen in relationships is this sign of, we're not going in maybe the best direction and we need to kind of recalibrate. So the Four Horsemen are these patterns, one being defensiveness. The second one is contempt. These are in no particular order. They're ordered so many different ways when you see them online or you read about them. The third one is criticism, and the fourth is stonewalling. And so these are things that I like to clarify that, like, if you do this once in a while, that does not necessarily mean that your relationship is doomed. However, it might be something that you need to work on or improve, because if you continue to use that over time, it erodes trust and fondness in a relationship. So I can go into those a little bit more in depth to kind of say more about them. Yes. So now I have to remember which order I said them in. The first one is defensiveness.
Yeah.
Yes. So defensiveness is basically, it emerges often when you feel like you're being attacked or criticized. And so it's this sort of defensive move to, defend your position, defend your character. And it often can come up as like, yeah, but, and you start talking about what your intent was, what your position is, what your perspective is. The trouble with defensiveness is it often is a response to a partner bringing something up to you, whether that's a complaint, whether it's a criticism, whether it's, hey, my feelings are hurt about something. So when we use defensiveness, what it's basically doing is diverting the conversation away from the original speaker and then making it more about you and your feelings and your intent and your thoughts. And so that can really derail connection and attunement, because then the person who brought up whatever they were bringing up no longer feels heard or listened to.
So would this, I was just like, would this look like, someone's like, hey, when you said this the other day, or when I didn't hear from you, like that hurt my feelings and it made me anxious. And then defensiveness would be the other person's like, well, 2 days ago you said this and like, I'm always doing this, and that. So it's kind of like that deflecting and.
Yeah. Or minimizing, like, yeah, but I've been really busy lately and it's, I can't help it. And I need you to be more understanding of that and And there may be some truth to that. And there may be something that you need to share back, but that may not be the time to bring that up, because I think of it as like a volleyball, like they're volleying to you to acknowledge something, to empathize with something, to hear them. And when you start going into your stuff, it takes away from that. So the what you want to do first, and there's an antidote to each of these things. So the antidote to defensiveness is to take some responsibility, which can be really hard for people, especially if they feel like what their partner is bringing to them doesn't feel fair, or they have a totally different perspective. They may struggle to, take some responsibility. But if there's even a modicum of truth or something you can understand about what the speaker was sharing with you, you're right, I wasn't as available the other day, or you're right, I didn't show up on time, or you're right, I haven't been paying as much attention to you. Start there before you start going into here's what's going on and here's why and all of that, because that will help the speaker who's bringing up the complaint or the concern to feel like you heard them.
So, I love that.
Well, and I'm curious, I know this is out of order a little bit, but what's the difference between that and stonewalling? Because those seem kind of closely related to me.
I do often think of like defensiveness as stonewalling are sort of a pair, and criticism and contempt are a pair. They're not always, but there are some flavors to those two that sort of stand out and sort of divide them. So stonewalling is when often when you're physiologically feeling flooded, which is the Gottman's term for feeling very overwhelmed and starting to enter sort of that fight, flight, or freeze mode. It's often a freeze response where you just sort of shut down, where you can become unresponsive, where you turn away, when you stop giving eye contact, when you stop responding. It can also be a flee response where you get up and leave. Where you walk out, when you walk away. Usually that's happening because your nervous system threat detector is going off saying, this feels threatening to me. I need to get away from it, either physically or emotionally shut it down.
So like one word answers kind of thing, or someone's like, well, hey, can you tell me how you feel about what I just said? And it's like, I don't know, whatever, or like that kind of thing. Just totally flat. Yeah.
It could be, crossing your arms and looking away, looking down, hunching over, just really no longer engaging. It's disconnecting and disengaging. And often that's serving a purpose. It's trying to protect you. And we often, unfortunately, can perceive threat in our relationships emotionally, sort of the same way we would perceive threats historically, back in cave dwelling days with bears showing up and predators and this, like it all sort of filters the same way through our nervous system. So threat is just seen as threat. Now, hopefully this, a lot of this content that we're talking about does it apply to situations of physical violence or abuse cycles, things like that? That's a totally different sort of area. But for those who feel like there is general safety in their relationship, there can be times where those threat detectors go off that say, I need to get out of here, or I need to go protect myself from whatever's happening. So that's totally fair and valid that sometimes your system is going to flood. It's just overwhelming. You're just can't think straight. And so the antidote to stonewalling is to practice some self-soothing. And what that often looks like is taking a break. So when your physiology is running wild and you can't think clearly, and sort of that cognitive part of you is offline, it often helps to say, you know what, I need to take a little break here. And the recommendation is that a break lasts between 20 and 30 minutes, because though it may not always seem this way, it takes a little bit of time to recover when your alarm system goes off. We need time to kind of regroup and rest and kind of gain our composure back.
Yeah, like for your pulse to slow down even, and your blood pressure, and your breathing kind of becomes more regulated and back to normal and stuff.
Exactly. Wow. What we know from some of the research from the Gottman Institute is that flooding signs are often a heart rate at about 100 beats per minute. If you're extremely athletic, your heart rate would be around 85 beats a minute. That starts to tell you that you're starting to elevate, because I think a resting heart rate is usually around the 65, 70, 75 mark.
Wow, that's amazing. Right. And so tell me if I'm wrong on this, Lauren, but I think so some of the Gottman like love lab stuff is they have couples sort of face a camera and have a conversation about something that's like an issue for them. And they can sort of, and by coding for like how many of the Four Horsemen they see in like a 3-minute clip or something like that, they can predict with like 93% accuracy, like who's going to stay together and who's not.
Oh, wow.
Right.
That John Gottman he's famously known for, and I think his average is, because there's sort of two pieces. I think he promotes that, with about 90+% accuracy, he can predict which couple will stay together and which will eventually divorce from like a 15-minute clip in total. But within the first 3 minutes, what you're referring to, Jared, is that first 3 minutes predicts with 96% accuracy what the rest of the conversation is going to look like. So if you start off with, guns ablaze and you're fired up and you're critical and you're contemptuous, like that's where the conversation will go from there. It's not likely to just suddenly become respectful and calm and composed.
Well, and I share that just because I think it's super cool, but also because when I picture like that, and what you just said about the heart rate is amazing to me, like how powerful our emotions are tied to our physiology, like just sitting in a chair talking to someone, right? So you're not like jumping up and down and waving your arms and yelling, but just by talking about a topic that agitates you, or and that getting overwhelmed with emotions like can just jack your heart rate like that.
Well, and I like very recently got out of a relationship. I think my heart rate is up right now. Like even just as you're talking, like thinking about conversations and fights, and like, I mean, I've been in kind of flight mode ever since the breakup. I'm having a hard time really like calming down, but I think I need to get a heart rate monitor.
Well, what's interesting, and COVID has really changed the whole way that I do therapy, because it's online now. And I know that there are ways to get around this. I haven't implemented it yet, but when I would have couples in my office with me physically back, a year ago plus, we would hook them up, and this is part of the Gottman method. You'll often get hooked up to a pulse oximeter. So those little doodads that just go on your doctor's office. They're cheap to buy. You can buy them, relative. They're like $20 each, so about $40 a pair. And you can buy them, online. And what they do is they measure two things. They measure your beats per minute with your heart rate, and then they also measure your blood oxygen. So that I think it's SpO2. Mm-hmm. And so what that's telling us is two things: what your heart rate is doing, and also how much oxygen you're getting into your blood and your body. So when people are like holding their breath, they're not breathing, they're more agitated. Sometimes that oxygen level will go down. And so we will set it so that the system will or the device will beep when it gets to 100 beats a minute. It'll beep when your blood oxygen goes below 95% so that we can slow down the pace and help to kind of regulate the discussion. Because if you're trying to push through when your physiology is shutting down, it's like just hitting a wall.
I have a question, but I'm going to save it. I'm going to save it until after you go through the other two.
Okay. Write it down. Don't forget.
Yeah, write it down. Remember
okay.
So the third horseman that I mentioned was contempt. But before I go into that, I think it's probably better to explain criticism first and then move into contempt. So I'm going to reverse their order a little bit here. And so criticism is basically when you may come across as blaming. It may feel like an attack to the other person. It feels like you are maybe focusing on the other person's character. And so what that can sound like, some clues that you may be critical or you may be hearing criticism is statements like you always, you never, and things that sort of go after more of you as a person rather than maybe some behavior. So an example would be of criticism, you always leave your shoes at the front door. Anybody could trip over them at any minute. Like, what's the matter with you? Why can't you just move them?
Yeah.
It's very critical. And those, criticism often goes hand in hand with defensiveness. So, criticism leads to defensiveness, leads to more criticism, leads to more defensiveness. It's sort of a back and forth attack, counterattack kind of vibe.
So like in the shoes example, right? Like the criticism is like, you're such a slob, like, why can't you be an adult and like keep and blah, blah, blah. And then the defensive person is like, it's not my fault that like you're type A and OCD and I have to arrange my whole life around your bullshit and blah, 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 blah. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so what we want to do is we want to be able to bring up when something is bothering us, but we also really want to be thoughtful about that. So there's a difference between criticism and a complaint. And this is where, people are often humbled to know that there's an option because there are going to be complaints in relationships. You're not going to get away with not having complaints.
Leanna's like, thank God. I have many complaints.
I have lots of complaints. Lots of people have complaints. There's often going to be things that are bothering you or that are not the way that you would like them to be or that leave you feeling a certain way. And we need to be able to voice that. So the difference with a complaint is that you're focusing more on yourself and what you need and how you're feeling about it, and you're asking for something. And here's where it's helpful to often state something called a positive need, which is to say what you do need or want rather than what you don't need or want. So in the shoe example, instead of saying like, don't leave your shoes at the front door, why can't you put them away? Like, what's the matter with you? A complaint would be, I feel worried when shoes are left at the front door that somebody's going to trip over them. And that worry starts to, grow. So I'm wondering if you could please put the shoes away, or can you please put the shoes away? Or I need you to put the shoes away. So you're saying what you want to happen or what you need to happen rather than what you don't want. And so that's how you're going to make a complaint. And the complaint kind of speaks to what we saw earlier when we talked about like the first 3 minutes of a dialogue. What we want to do is try to soften our startup. That's what a complaint is, really a softer way of bringing up, instead of criticism, sort of bringing up what the issue is. Because the issue may not be about the shoes itself. The issue is how those shoes are impacting you. Like, I feel worried that someone's going to trip. That's the issue. Not necessarily that the shoes are there. The shoes are just the trigger for the worry that you have. So if you're softening your startup, which is the antidote to criticism, that's going to help the rest of the conversation go more smoothly. Now, one thing that can be frustrating for people is that even if they deliver a beautiful softened startup and it's very much more of a, a complaint, not a criticism, you still might receive defensiveness from your partner. And that is really hard.
Leanna's nodding vigorously for the listener.
That was actually going to be my question. Yeah.
The thing about that is you've done your part. If you are the one, like, this is what you have control over. I can deliver a complaint. I can do that gently. I can say what I need. And then it's sort of my side of the street is done. If the other person's getting defensive, that's a really tough spot to be in. And it depends on the dynamic. You could do a number of things. You could say, you know what, let's take a break and let's come back to this in a little bit. Or, hey, I'm wondering if you're feeling defensive. I'm trying really hard to deliver this thoughtfully. And I'm wondering if you may need to hear me say it differently. Is there something I can do to help it feel less, antagonizing for you? Because remember, you want to try to be on the same team. It's not you versus the partner. Mm-hmm. It's I'm trying to be able to express myself thoughtfully and kindly, but also honestly. And I also need for you to be able to receive that. So I might get curious and say, is there a different way I can put this so that you could better receive it, so you don't feel attacked? And even just sometimes saying, hey, I'm not trying to attack you here. I'm not trying to blame you. I'm trying to let you know where I'm coming from.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
So that would be some examples around criticism. A really common thing, we see this a lot, as we do with, defensiveness and stonewalling. The fourth one, which I presented earlier, is the third, but I moved it around. So contempt is the one that we say is sort of the worst of them all. Contempt is sort of like criticism on steroids. Like, it's much more potent, and it's much more damaging to the relationship. Contempt is coming to things sort of from a place of superiority, like where you're looking down on your partner. It's coming from a place of disrespect. And this can come out as name calling, being unkind, mockery, sometimes sarcasm. Not all sarcasm, but some sarcasm can be contemptuous, where you're sort of hiding your disdain through sarcasm. And so what you're communicating is really unkind, So going back
I'm sorry. Does threatening go in there?
I think it depends I think it depends on the situation. I think threatening could be contempt. It could also be sort of more of an abusive thing that is sort of outside of this. Sure. But I think has elements of contempt.
Yeah.
Sure.
Really.
Okay. Well, I also wonder, like, as you're talking, I'm thinking like, like the poisonousness of contempt, right? And like, is it like sometimes there's like a dismissiveness where it's just like, oh yeah, like, of course you would say that, kind of thing, where it's like, I'm not even going to engage honestly and say, hey, it bothers me when you say that.
Yes.
But it's sort of this like I'm not even going to bother anymore kind of thing.
Yeah. It could be sort of act like you're disgusted with your partner, like you're just totally over them. And it's really insidious. It's so toxic to a relationship. Anytime there's name calling, that's time to sort of pause. Like when we've gotten to the point where you're calling each other names, that definitely requires attention, because, a healthy, loving relationship, you don't call your partner names. That's sort of like a red line that you just don't cross.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always, am firmly believe, and you can tell me if I'm right about this, but I don't think you should ever cuss at your partner either.
Right.
Right. And I'm not guilty of that, but I try my hardest not to cuss at my partner. And it's really hurts when someone looks at you and says, fuck you, I feel like that is like contempt at its finest. How do you come back from that?
And it depends, I think, on the overall state of the relationship. So, if you're in what the Gottmans called the negative sentiment override or negative perspective, it's sort of like, I describe it as like putting on like these really gray shaded glasses, and everything in the relationship gets filtered through these really sort of foggy gray lenses. So I think from the research when they were in the Love Lab, they would find that even just sort of a neutral statement like, oh, the sky's blue today, or the clouds are out, or like something really innocuous, And depending on the state of the relationship would determine sort of what direction that would be interpreted. So if you're in more of a negative state, you might say, well, duh, like I could see the sun's out, or like, something kind of snarky, versus if you're more in a positive state, more of a positive perspective, you may be like, oh, it looks like a nice day out. You're responsive, you're engaging. So, contempt that's expressed in a more positive perspective dyad is going to be received really differently than if you're already in the negative perspective. You think of this as a relationship bank account, which is another Gottman principle. And, the more you're doing withdrawals, if you're not adding deposits back in, you just get more and more overdrafted. And, when you're in debt and it's large, making a deposit of 10 cents here and 20 cents there and $1 here, and it doesn't seem to add up compared to the amount of debt that you're in. So that's why we really want to be cautious and conscientious about making deposits. And actually, they have a ratio for that. I want to flip back because I know I didn't talk about the antidote.
I know, I was going to ask.
And then I'll come back to the ratio. So the antidote to contempt is overall, globally, you want to try to build a culture of appreciation in the relationship, meaning that you want to express fondness, gratitude, appreciation, kindness often. When we do that, we're helping to stay more in the green and not in that sort of black zone. So overall, day to day, we want to try to build that in the moment. If you feel like contempt is starting to emerge, what you want to do is roll that back by focusing on your own feelings and needs. So instead of talking about how the other person is screwing something up or not doing something well enough or doing something about, talk about how you are feeling. I'm feeling so disappointed. I'm feeling so hurt because of, this, what's going on. This is what I need. And you focus on you and what your needs are, not the partner. Because if you start talking about your partner when you're feeling contemptuous, it's just going to go in that direction.
Oh, yeah, that's helpful. Well, and I was thinking, when you talked about cursing at your partners, like to me, and like, I know you, right? And I know, so like, to me though, I think that's like when you're in a state where you're flooded. Like where you're just totally overwhelmed. Like, and I even relate to this. Like I had a series of conversations with the person I'm seeing this week. And at one point, like I felt like I was feeling like attacked and like sensitive. And so I was like, I didn't curse at her, but I was like more agitated in the conversation than I want to be. I was kind of like, well, what the fuck? Like, what is this? Like, and like looking, hearing you talk about Lauren being flooded, I'm like, oh yeah, that's where I was. Like, cause at one point I was like she hung up and then like didn't call me back, and like, I was like all so like wound up in that
activated
time. Yeah. And I also think too, like one thing when I think about contempt, I think like something that a lot of men can do is this like dismissive form of contempt of like, you're irrational. Like, there's no point in me even talking to you. Like, kind of this like, oh, like, let me know when you're done, and like, we can talk like adults or whatever, it's this. Yeah.
I had someone say to me, cause I'm very good at stating my needs and I have a lot of them. And so I get criticized all the time for constantly like, I'm constantly doing things wrong. Why you keep bringing stuff? I'm constantly doing things wrong. This has been a cycle in all of my relationships. And I've worked so hard to come so gently with the information. But it's usually because I have an anxious attachment style. And so I'm asking for reassurance, for security. And I've been told one time my partner and I were in an argument and he said something and I said, well, I'm feeling insecure about this. Like I'm feeling insecure. He's like, you're always insecure.
Oh dear.
And it's like, what do you do with that? Like at that point, it's like, I can't, there's nothing I can do now. Like if my if my insecurity is becoming a form of resentment, I can't do anything about it.
Well, and that's actually an interesting, I don't know, Lauren, if you could like help us piece this out, because this like, you know, obviously saying you're always insecure is like not a good way to make progress.
Well, and not true at all.
There's a keyword which was always.
Yeah.
That's right.
Criticism.
Yeah.
Right. But also like, but I think I've been in a position in relationships where like, I'm like, I feel like I can't win.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like if that was the response and not like you're always insecure, it's like, I'm trying to be a good partner to you, but I feel like no matter what I do, like I can't win, like it's not enough. And that makes me feel undervalued.
So what is that? Because
you fix that.
Yeah, you know, I'm just starting, and I'm by no means like a specialist in this yet, because, you know, most of my training has been in the Gottman method, but I'm starting to learn more emotion-focused couple therapy, which is by Dr. Sue Johnson, and it's attachment-based. And so you're describing like when I'm more anxious and I'm turning to you for engagement, connection, attunement, or reassurance, and you're turning away from me essentially, or you're turning against me, and you're saying, no, I'm not going to provide that, or I think that you're asking for too much. You know, I think there's responsibility because relationships are dynamic between partners. And so there are some things that we can do when we're on either side of that dynamic. You know, for the partner, what you are needing is someone to turn toward and say, what can I do to reassure you? How can I show up for you? How can I be there for you? How can I show you that I'm hearing you and listening? And that's hard because sometimes it doesn't necessarily mean that we all agree with everything. Like my partner says, I don't show up enough, and maybe I don't agree with that. But I can at least say, like, I hear that that's where you're coming from. And I want to do what I can to make that so that it's not happening. Like, I don't want that to be the case. I don't want you feeling like, you know, you're let down or disappointed or anxious. I don't want you to feel that way. Let's talk more about this. Let's figure out, because I don't know that I know exactly how to do that. And I want to do that for you.
I feel so reassured.
Well, it's interesting, like, to bring in some like masculine, feminine dynamics. I was just reading this book by David Data, and one of the things he says is that, you know, when the feminine is asking for something to be attended to in the moment, the masculine often goes to this knee-jerk place of like wanting credit for all the things we did over the past 3 days. Of like, you know, it's like, well, but I cooked dinner and I did all this, you know, and so I think, you know, what could be reassuring to the partner who feels like they can't win is like, I'm not asking you to like always do this. I'm not saying like you have to change everything you're doing in the behavior. I'm saying like right now, I feel like this right now. And like, if you can just take a moment and be with me in that, right, you know, so it's not like some big promise or some huge lifestyle or behavior change. I'm at just this moment, you know? And I think then that would feel less overwhelming, or even maybe less like defensiveness provoking. I don't know.
I think also, you know, another way to describe this, so that, you know, the anxious and avoidant styles, another way to describe this in adult relationships is the pursuer and the withdrawer, or the protester and distancer. They're sort of different sides of this, the same thing. But in those ways, you're pursuing your partner and saying, I need you to hear me, to listen, to respond, to engage with me. And there are some things that we can do in that respect as well, because sometimes we need to back off some of the pursuit, because that can be overwhelming and perpetuate withdrawal. But then, you know, the more withdrawal creates more pursuit. And so it's sort of this, you know, unbroken infinity way to think of it. Like, there's not one person that's responsible for starting a chain reaction. It's something that is sort of self-sustained based on the roles that we play. But one thing that I'm thinking is, we can sort of counter if I have some needs that I need to express, if I feel disappointed, if I feel, anxious about something, I want to also make sure I'm catching my partner doing things that are working for me, that are supportive for me. And I want to make that known too, because it can sometimes feel unbalanced for a partner if what they're hearing is the criticism and the needs, and they're not hearing the appreciation and gratitude. And so that's something that if you're on more of that anxious or protest or pursue side, can I also look for when my partner is doing something right, or when they're getting it right, when they're really attuned to me, and let them know that and reinforce that, so that that's going to give a more balanced perspective.
This is amazing.
I know. I want to keep going, but I'm also
we need to transition.
I want to switch gears to talking about
sex.
How
can we transition?
Because I think I left people hanging on a ratio.
On the bank account, yes.
Bank account. Yeah.
Okay.
Let me do that. Then we can start talking about some other things. So the ratio that I was talking about with the bank account is basically from the research. They found that during conflict, what we want to have for a healthy relationship is a 5-to-1 ratio of positive to negative exchange between partners. So during conflict, what exactly does that look like? That looks like giving eye contact, nodding along, being open to accepting another person's perspective, saying things like, you might be right, or I'll have to think about that. Reaching out a hand, offering a hug, offering an apology. Those are all some ways to make deposits, even during conflict. So as there are some negative exchanges back and forth, we want 5 positives to make up for every one. Now that's the conflict ratio. What a lot of people don't realize is there's a different ratio for day to day. So when you're not in conflict, just going about your lives, that ratio becomes 20-to-1. So we want 20 positive exchanges or interactions for every 1 negative on a day-to-day basis. And for some people, that sounds like a lot, but I want to break that down to make it feel really manageable. So that could be a kiss goodbye in the morning, have a good day. It could be a text to say, how's your day going? It could be taking interest in conversing about how the day went. It could be, engaging in a date night together. It could be, giving a hug. It's all these little things.
It could be sending really fire Bernie Sanders memes throughout the day.
It could definitely be. Absolutely. Absolutely. So it's all these really small ways that you express positive connection. So
okay. That's actually really cool, and I appreciate you making it feel more manageable, right?
Yes, not grand gestures.
And maybe this is a nice segue into our next topic, but I've also heard people say you should have 5 fucks to every 1 fight. I've heard someone say that ratio as well.
Is that true?
I don't know if that's true.
I've never heard it.
I mean, I would hope it'd be more fucks.
Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, let's go to the 21 ratio.
20-1
for fucks to fight.
Depends on the dynamic between partners.
Oh my gosh, that's such a great transition.
Look at that.
Okay, so now how does the process work when you're working with people as a sex therapist?
Yeah. So, sex therapy is a little bit different than other types of therapy. Sometimes we're doing a bit of both. And so it could be sort of weaving the two together. But when I'm seeing someone just for sex therapy and it's pretty straightforward, a sexual health issue and not a lot of other variables that are influencing things, it tends to be briefer. So those sessions tend to be shorter term in nature, and often are pretty directive and informational, and often involve homework. Sometimes and oftentimes just talking about what's going on sexually may not be enough to actually get you towards your goal. So there's often an exercise, a reading, something to try at home to come back, and then we discuss it and then move forward from there.
What are the most common issues that people come and see you for? I mean, and is it mostly individuals or couples together?
I'd say I do a bit of both. I think that, people tend to, for sex therapy, come in more on their own at first. And then maybe bring their partner in somewhere along the way. But there's certainly times where they come in together at first, right off the bat. And either way is fine. It's really sort of what feels most comfortable to you at the time. I'd say the most common complaints that I see, or the common issues that people want to work with, are low sexual desire, which I see a lot, and also a mismatch in desire between partners. So one person wants sex more frequently, one person wants it a little bit less, or a lot less, and there's a gap there. And that gap is causing them distress and maybe causing some conflict or causing disconnection. And so I'd say those are probably the top two things that I tend to treat, maybe top three. The third would be like a performance anxiety. And, kind of getting stuck in your head and having that influence your ability to get aroused or have an orgasm.
Do you want to go from here?
I'm like, can we talk about that third one? Well, I mean, I think I want to actually, I'm really curious in talking about all of them, but so when you have people who are saying like, I love my partner, we have an amazing relationship, I don't want to be without them, but I don't feel sexual towards them, right? Like, cause how do you diagnose and treat that? Because and I'll just leave it there.
Yeah. It's a really common thing. I see it a lot. And there are some, generalities that, it's usually the female partner with low desire and the male partner with high desire. And that's certainly true a lot. And it's also not true a lot. And so there's a lot of female partners who have higher desire if they're in a heterosexual relationship, and their male partner has lower desire. So we can see that go both ways. So I just want to bust that there's a myth that that's sort of only in one direction. It can happen in any sort of direction. And it also is something I see among, queer couples as well. So it can affect, anyone. And, one of the things that I usually like to start off with is going over something called the dual control model, which is just this fancy term and a psychological principle that actually Dr. Emily Nagoski breaks down really well in her book, which is one of my top book recommendations, called Come As You Are.
Oh, yeah, I've been recommended that before. I need to read it. Okay.
Seriously, a recommended book for everyone to read. She breaks it down and just kind of explains it like, imagine your sexuality has a gas pedal and a brake pedal. And there's a certain number of things that hit the gas pedal and move you towards sex. And there's a certain number of things that hit the brakes and pull you away. And what we need is to find some sort of balance, or at least lift some of the brake pedal so that the gas pedal can move forward. So what we often think of is just rev on the gas, right? Like, let's get candles and music and take a bath and go on holiday, or like all these things to sort of hit the gas pedal. And that's all great stuff. However, if you've got 2 tons of brick hitting that brake pedal, you're not going to go very far. And so we need to be mindful of both pedals. And so often what I do is I start with folks by identifying what some of those variables are. What's hitting your brakes? And these days, it's a lot of things that are hitting the brakes, from, all of the stressors we're experiencing, both individually, interpersonally, and then socially and environmentally around us. And of those brake pedal factors, some of those things are things we don't have control over. Like, we're in a global pandemic and we're stuck at home, and that's just the way it is right now. So how do I work around that? So there might be some things that we can remove or lighten its load. and other things where we just have to figure out how to work around it. So that's where I often like to start, because often when folks are describing having low desire, there's usually a pretty sensitive brake pedal and lots hitting the brakes.
Yeah, I had a partner who withdrew from me more and more as the relationship progressed and as the fighting got more and more, because I think that he was avoiding intimacy so as to protect himself. And so then it created more fighting, because I felt intimacy when we had sex. And I mean, I've always had a bigger sexual drive than any of my partners anyway. And, you know, and then I have trauma alongside that too. So, I mean, I guess, what's the approach for the couple where, you know, the one person has a lot of brakes on, the other person is feeling rejected, not desired? Like, how do you get past that? I mean, you know, other than what you just told us.
We start there, but that's not the full story, I know. And, you know, this is such a complex issue that, you know, that's often what I start telling people. Like, it's complicated. It's not such a quick and easy fix as you might think it would be. I'm actually co-authoring a book all about this, when you have either low desire or a mismatch, and how do you work through that? And there's a lot of layers to it. You know, I think there's work on both sides, you know, for the lower desire partner, for the higher desire partner. Even just like for the partner who's feeling rejected, can the person who is saying, you know, no to sex, can they do that more gently? Can they be thoughtful? Can they offer some options and alternatives? So for example, if I have higher desire and my partner is saying, you know, I'm not really feeling it, I'm not in the mood, I don't want to, maybe they could say something other than just no each time. Although you're allowed to say no, of course, that's fine. And we want consent. But maybe sometimes it's, you know, I'm not really feeling sexual, but could we cuddle together? Could we take a bath together? Can I rub your back? Can we sit and talk? Maybe there's something else that you might be up for that would provide some intimacy and some connection. Maybe, you know, I'm not really feeling sexual, but maybe we can do something with, you know, an alternative to sex. Like, I can hold you while you grab your toy, or, you know, we can do some, you know, manual sex or oral sex. Like, maybe it's not just one script that we have to follow each time. So, you know, both expanding the definition of sex and often, you know, finding some alternatives and other ways to connect that feel flexible, so that it's not just a binary option, like yes to sex, no to sex, and that's it.
Yeah. Is it, I mean, and I know the answer to this question, but when someone isn't feeling sexual, does it mean that they're no longer attracted to their partner?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And I mean, could that be true for some people? Absolutely. Most of the time, more often than not, that's not the issue. By the time they are coming to see me, it's not that. And, you know, I think what's a really helpful concept for folks to learn about, again, kind of going back to the Come As You Are book, where she talks about the two different types of desire. Many of us don't realize that there's different types of desire. And I don't want to leave out people who may be more asexual and maybe don't experience desire at all. That might be what's happening too. And that's something that you could, you know, work on and discuss with a therapist or read more about. For those who are sexual or identify as sexual, that, you know, sex is not just a spontaneous thing for people. And that's the model that we often use, this spontaneous desire for sex. Like, you know, a lightning bolt hits you, you're up for it and ready to go. That may be true for some people, but it's certainly not true for all people. And based on research with cisgender women, it's 70% plus of cisgender women don't experience spontaneous desire. Or if they do, it's very early in the relationship when they're still in the honeymoon phase. And then it sort of morphs or shifts into something else. And what it shifts into is something called responsive desire, which means that often arousal has to come first before desire and interest. So for example, I hear lots about this new Netflix show, Bridgerton, that I am just getting into. But that's an example of, I'm watching this show, sex wasn't on my mind, I wasn't really thinking about it, I wasn't into it. And then all of a sudden a sex scene comes on and it's hot and I like it. And now my body's getting turned on. And as my body's getting turned on, I may now feel more desire for sex and more motivated to seek it out. That's responsive desire. So I may not have started off the show feeling, aroused or desirous, but I got there because there was a context for me to respond to.
So I would love to talk about, because I feel like I a lot experience a combination of that like withdrawal or that like losing sexual desire. And for me, it's tied up in the relationship dynamics and it's tied up in performance anxiety stuff. Because I think like what I relate to when I see other relationships where one partner is really like avoiding intimacy and stuff like that is, for me, I'm such a pleaser. And I do all of this work that I don't actually need to do. And so then over time, as the relationship feels more like work and I get exhausted and then I get resentful, and then like the first thing that goes away is my desire. And I think a lot of that is exacerbated by performance anxiety, which is a common thing for a lot of men. Because it's like when I'm already in that place of like giving and not feeling like I'm receiving, then sex feels like another place where I have to perform, where I have to sort of it doesn't feel like it's for me. And I think I've even evolved a lot of coping mechanisms where it's easier for me to like avoid my own pleasure and please my partner. And when I do that, I get into like thinking, because I'm really like sort of reading them and whatever, and I get disconnected from my own body.
Exactly.
And it's hard for me to like reconnect. So I don't know if you can like speak to kind of like, because you talked about kind of performance issues and the phrase you used was like getting all in your head, and that resonated so strongly for me. So like how do you work with that with your clients and people who come to you?
It's something that I see a lot, and you just sort of hit the nail on the head with so many of the components that seem to drive that, right? So when you're overthinking, when you're trying to focus maybe too much on your partner and disconnecting from your own experience and your own body, that's where some of those issues can emerge. And it's really tricky because it's not the most intuitive process to work your way out of, because if you think about it too much, it's making things worse. But then if you try not to think about it, it actually makes it worse, because it's following the law of thought suppression. The more you try not to think about something, the more you think about it, not less. And so it really leaves people feeling stuck, because it's like, so then what do you do? One of the first things that I do when I'm treating someone who has performance anxiety, and I call it that because that's what people recognize. I also like to remind people that sex is not a performance, it's more of an experience. And so even just this idea of performing is something that we try to reframe. But what I usually start with is just, explaining sort of what's happening in your body. Like, why is that happening? And if you imagine that internally you have these two levers. So one lever is your stress response, back to the sort of fight, flight, freeze response. And then the other lever is your sexual response. These have an inverse relationship. So the more your body is entering its stress response, the less likely you are to be able to be, even starting with desire, but to be aroused and to get into sex. So we want to try to mitigate the stress response so that the arousal can emerge. And so, it's essentially kind of going back to the cave dwelling days and our, there's a bear that shows up. Like physiologically, that was a good thing to happen. If your body started to sense that there was threat, you would want the blood flow to leave the nose, move to your extremities, either your hands to fight, your feet to flee. And that was a good thing. That was designed well. Maybe too well or really well for the context of those days. Now, many of us are hopefully not facing those sort of in the moment life-threatening situations. And so it can be really perplexing when you're with this partner and you want to get turned on and you want to have this moment and your body's primed to run or to fight or to shut down. It's really confusing, but our nervous system is so old. And it's not really caught up in many ways to some of our sort of modern day living. And so it tends to be really binary. There's, just threat or no threat, and that's it. And I think I mentioned that earlier. So, even having a partner who's there and willing and ready can register as threatening because you're like, well, I want to make this go well. And I want to make sure that they have a good time and I have a good time and everything moves according to plan. And it starts to stress you out.
Yeah. And and if I don't get a boner or I lose my boner, her feelings are going to be hurt. And then that's going to be a whole thing. Yeah.
That's right. Exactly. And as you can see, as we're talking about that, not the sexiest thoughts, right? Not arousing, not appealing, right? It's more of like a overwhelming or something you would want to avoid or withdraw from. So it makes complete sense. So I think even just understanding that mechanism, how that works, can be helpful. The other thing that I do, and this is the main staple of my work, is helping people to become more present in the moment. Because what's happening is with performance anxiety, it's sometimes one, two, or a combination of things. You're either thinking a couple steps ahead to what will or won't happen and what the next moment will bring. Sometimes you're thinking back to previous experiences, like last time this happened and didn't happen and whatever, or you're bouncing between these two. You're like, next moment, last time, and it's just all stressful. So the antidote really to performance anxiety is to be more present and mindful in the moment and to take some of the pressure off by making the experience more flexible. So, hey, if we have intercourse, cool. If we don't, we can find other things to do. We're going to just focus on being here in this moment together, doing things that feel good, just connecting with each other and allowing that, sometimes that's going to result in intercourse and sometimes it's not. And that needs to be okay because it's treated as this big, groundbreaking disappointment and, this can't continue. It's a big deal. It just adds stress when the response is, okay, well, we had a good time. And that's what I often recommend is, no matter what happens, can you try to end with something that feels pleasurable or connecting? Because that's still going to file away in your memory as, maybe it didn't work out the way I wanted, but we had a good time.
Yeah, that's so cool. And I think, I think a lot of times the responses of our partners like exacerbate this.
Yes.
And I so appreciate you like busting some of these myths of like, sometimes the man is the like lower libido. I have a close friend who said, he was talking about like when he and his current partner first got together and he was like, we were talking about sex and she very eloquently and thoughtfully, said all this stuff of like, look, I'm not always going to have an orgasm. That's not something that happens every time for me. And it doesn't mean that I don't desire you. It doesn't mean that the sex wasn't pleasurable for me. And, sometimes I might want that focus on me to try to get there. But other times, like, please don't pressure me, all this stuff. And he was like, she laid this out so beautifully. And then I said, yeah, me too. And she was not okay with that at all. Because
really?
Yes, I think so many women have this thing that like men are always like, as soon as someone shows up with a vagina, a heterosexual man is like rock hard and ready to go. And that's all he needs.
Right.
And if that doesn't happen, if it doesn't play out in this sort of script that's in so many women's mind,
right,
that they feel very self-conscious. I've had when you talk about, Lauren, like sort of stopping and doing other things and like, okay, maybe we don't need to have intercourse right now. I've had experiences in my life where I've been having intercourse with someone for whatever reason. I got in my head about it, and I like needed to like sort of, and what I like to do is like, let's stop and like, let me reconnect. Like kissing helps me, and like eye contact and whatever. And I went to do that, and the woman got angry at me. Like she was like, what are you doing? Like, and like got like, and like sort of went on the attack. And when I was already sort of like, but I get it from her, like she was
and
feeling rejected or whatever.
Yeah. So let me step in here from the woman's perspective, because I definitely have some PTSD. I mean, I wouldn't say clinical trauma, but experiences that have made me feel very undesired, that have, I feel rejected. And then that goes back into my deep-seated feelings of abandonment, and so how can, as a woman, like you said, like, just, I really need to work on that, is like, try and be in the moment. An orgasm doesn't have to happen. And more like ebb and flow. I just really like having a penis inside of me. It feels so good. I'm turned on when his dick is hard. And, it's like, it is when that doesn't happen, it's almost like I struggle because I was not pleased for so long that I'm a pleaser. Right. So my identity in sex is being able to give really good blowjobs, to be there for him. And so if I'm there for him and he doesn't want it, then I've lost my identity.
Oh, interesting.
So I guess and so obviously I'm aware of those things. I need to work on them. I need to be okay with a man pleasing me. And actually my last partner was really great about that. He was, very like, let's get out your toy. Let's make sure you come first. Like really, really probably the most sexual compatible partner I've ever had. And he was really good about that. And he didn't always come or want to have sex. And that was hard. So even though he's there for me, he's saying, I'm attracted to you. I love you. Let's cuddle. And I'm like, but I want your dick to be hard. I mean, like, what are we supposed to, like, how else can we kind of soothe ourselves in that moment?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's, because what he's needing in that moment is more of that, like, flexible sort of reassurance that, not a big deal. We can, do something else. Let's be here together. And in that moment, what I would say if someone was in your shoes is, if you can, if this feels safe and comfortable to you, to maybe take a couple of deep breaths and sort of let your system calm a little bit and sort of recenter and regroup for yourself, because it's perfectly fine that you feel disappointment, and it's perfectly fine that that can feel jarring. But we also want to make sure that we're creating a safe space for the partner then to be able to experience whatever their body's doing and not have them feel shame for that or, criticize them for that. Sexual function often follows a bell curve, a statistical bell curve. So the bulk of experience will hopefully be in the pretty good range. So more experiences, hopefully, than not, where sex is good. It's fine. It's nice. It's, it was great. And, 2.5% on one tail, something around that, is going to be not so great. I wanted to be able to come and I couldn't. I wanted to be able to get aroused and I couldn't. I had no desire. I had, something hurt. I felt bloated, whatever. Real life sex. And then, the other tail, the other 2.5% on the other side is going to be amazing sex. That was great. That was, phenomenal. It was, noteworthy. And so there's going to be this range, and there is no 100% of the time mind-blowing sex. And in fact, even knowing that sort of is more of a tail end, that sort of spectacular, knock your socks off kind of sex is maybe more of the exception than the norm. The norm is going to be, we had a good time, it was nice. And I try to help people, diversify and expand their view around sex. So what I would do with you, Leanna, is like work on, what does sex mean to you? Like you said, that's when you feel close. It's maybe when you feel desired. It's when you feel reassured or connected. And maybe, tapping into and tuning into like, are there some other times where you also feel that? And if you don't know the answer to that, that may be what we explore. What is it like for you to just make really deep eye contact with your partner? What is it like for you to just hold their hand and look at them and have them, rub your arm or so? Like, do some of those things provide some sense of, connection and intimacy for you? Because the top two reasons that people have sex tend to be for some variation of for pleasure and for connection. And so if that's your why, that's the reason why. So you're describing like, it feels really good. It's for pleasure. That's great. And so sometimes it's going to be just what you want it to be. And then other times when that's maybe not on the menu, what are some other things that we could do that would bring you maybe similar pleasure or some sense of pleasure for when that's not as available?
I love that.
Going into it, starting to think like, even if this is what we're planning, I need to have sort of a flexible attitude about it, because even if both of us really want it, sometimes our bodies and our brains are on two different pages. And that needs to be allowed to happen. And so sometimes even just setting a different expectation with sex that like, this is what we're going to try. But, if that doesn't work out, we have plan B, C, and D.
Well, and I resonated with what you shared about like how that feels to you about your identity as like a giver and a pleaser. Because I think those of us that have, like these deep-seated beliefs that like we have to do for others to be deserving of love and affection, right?
Yeah.
That when and I'm the same way, I think. Like my partners typically like over the course of a relationship, like definitely have more orgasms than I do. And some of that is because I think from a performance anxiety standpoint, like that helps take a little pressure off of me. Like if I'm like, oh, like she just had 2 orgasms. Now, like, I'm not so worried. Like if I don't come through, like that she's going to be disappointed and upset and frustrated or whatever. And I think I would feel similar to you where if I had a partner that, I had a harder time bringing to orgasm or like didn't want that less, that would stir up a lot of anxiety in me. That would stir up more of my anxiety because like sometimes, because it is pleasurable to me to please my partner and it does feel like that nice intimacy and connection. But I think some of it is like, I'm trying to get validation, and I think that's the side I need to work on a little bit,
And to be able to, recognize that for yourself and find maybe ways to communicate that with a partner and saying, it helps me to hear that you're enjoying yourself, or it helps me to hear that, we can be flexible sometimes, that that it's not going to be this big, letdown. Because I totally get it. I mean, the feelings are there. You're disappointed or what you wanted to happen didn't happen. And how can we sort of, share that with a partner in a more sort of flexible and open way? So it's like, yeah, it would have been nice if we could have had, intercourse, but I'm also just really enjoying being here with you.
I know we have taken up so much of your time. Do you have time for 2 more questions?
Sure.
Okay. I wanted to speak on the LGBTQ community for a second, because you share that is some of your work is with LGB and trans clients. How is that work different? What are some specifics that you work on them with?
I mean, I think a lot of the sex therapy tends to be the same, and a lot of the relationship therapy seems to be the same. So I think, for queer partners, for polyamorous partners, or, non-monogamous partners, sex therapy and relationship therapy often looks the same. I will often, share that there's not been enough research on, queer couples, on, people who are non-binary or trans in terms of their sexualities and partnerships, that we're certainly lacking in that research. And, some of the brief studies that the Gottmans have done with gay and lesbian couples has shown that their method is effective with queer couples as well. So I'd say a large part of the work is the same. My work with the transgender and non-binary community tends to be different in that it's just much more of a supportive role in helping people to explore their identity, to explore what they need surrounding their identity, to point them towards resources, to help them access those resources. So I have provided gender care in terms of supporting folks through their transition, both socially and medically. And I've been doing that for several years. And it's a different type of work. It's just really, helping people get some of the information that they need and the support they need along that journey.
Love that. Well, we didn't get to the trauma. I was going to ask you a question about sexual trauma and overcoming that, but I think that might be like just a whole nother thing. Yeah.
We'll have to have you back.
Yeah. So I have one fun question. Okay. So I read somewhere that the average female orgasm is like 40 something seconds or something like that. And I'm over here thinking like, okay, when I orgasm, it's like a few seconds of just that intense pleasure, but I'm not anywhere near like 40 seconds. So what is that like? Is that a myth? Is that true? Like, what is the length of an orgasm?
This is such a good question. And it's one that I feel like I should have a good answer to. This may be one of those things where like, I have to maybe go back to my books. I think I would be curious about that because it may be that the actual peak of the orgasm is just a few seconds, but maybe some of the pulsating or the engorgement or the blood flow, like that could maybe persist a little bit longer because you may feel sometimes after orgasm that there's still like a pulsing in your genitals. And so that's what it's referring to.
Okay.
Could also be maybe that's like, it can be up to this long. Maybe that's sort of the higher end of the spectrum. Or maybe it's not. That's a great question that I will have to
or maybe, Leanna, you just got to get those times up. You got to get
I'll work on it.
Training for a marathon, right?
Exactly.
Just a very quick follow-up to that. Why do some women squirt and some don't?
Oh, that's a good question.
Great question. And the answer is we don't know. We don't know.
Is squirting, because I feel like squirting is like a prize for women. It's like, I squirted or he made me squirt. And like
from porn.
Okay.
I think this whole idea of squirting, and by the way, they will often sort of inject water, is what I'm told, into female performers so that there is that sort of sense of squirting. And my understanding is we don't have a lot of understanding about it. We're still learning about it. Women's sexual health is wildly underfunded for research, probably no surprise to many people. And so we don't know. There's a difference, there's squirting and then there's female ejaculate, and they seem to produce different fluids. There's still debate about, what that fluid is comprised of. It's just a watered down fluid that's coming from the urethra. Is it a combination of fluids? There's still a lot that we're learning. But it doesn't seem to be something that you can just make yourself do. It's not like a level up kind of thing that you can create. It seems to just be like, some bodies seem to do that and some don't. And
yeah,
it's just a different body function than others,
Yeah. This has been amazing. You're amazing. We love you. This conversation flew by.
This is great.
Please tell my listeners where they can find you.
Sure. I would say that I'm probably most active on Instagram, and my handle is at Dr. Lauren Fogel Mersy, and Mersy is with an S, not a C. And I also have the same handle on Facebook. And currently the clinic that I am practicing at is called the Sexual Wellness Institute, and that's located in a suburb of Minneapolis.
Aww.
Beautiful.
We have a new thing where
that we keep forgetting about.
Before you go, because we promise we will actually let you go at some point. What are you grateful for?
Oh, right now I'm so grateful to be working and to be able to do my job from home. I just feel very blessed that I was able to transition pretty quickly to working from home, and to be able to be employed right now is really just such a blessing.
Oh, I love that. All right. Well, Lauren, thank you for being on. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.
Thank you again, Dr. Lauren Fogel Mersy.
Dr. Lauren, amazing.
Amazing. Like, yeah. So, guys, go follow her on Instagram at Dr. Lauren Fogel Mersy. And
it's Mercy with an S.
Mercy with an S. And yeah, go again, like we always say, go DM her, go tag her in your stories and tell her how much you loved her on Hello and Goodbye.
Yes. Show her that hello and goodbye love.
Yeah. And then we're going to say what we're grateful for.
Oh, yeah, because she did. And it was so sweet. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm ready.
Why don't you go first?
I'll go first. So I am grateful for a person this week.
Ooh.
I'm grateful for Van Lathan, who is the co-host of one of my favorite podcasts called Higher Learning. And he, what I'm grateful for is he speaks really openly about his struggles with mental health on their podcast. And there was even an episode right before Christmas where he shared how he sees like multiple therapists because I think COVID and all these things and as a black man in the world, like with everything that's going on. And he shared in an episode before Christmas, like how his therapist was like, "Hey, do you have a gun in the house?" Like, and he was like, "Yes." And she was like, "I need you to give that to somebody else." And he did. And he talked about like that being like a positive thing. Right. And so I think, any person, but especially a man, and maybe even especially like a man of color, to be that open and real and vulnerable is such a good thing for the world. And when I listen to it, it helps me and it makes me feel more hopeful for the world and all the people out there that are struggling. So I am grateful for Van Lathan.
What's the podcast?
The podcast is called Higher Learning.
Higher Learning. Okay.
Yes.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah, it's really good.
I am going to go in on person as well. I'm thankful we have a fucking new president.
Yes.
Yes. We forgot to talk about that in the intro, but I mean, I just feel a sense of like just a huge relief.
Yes.
That we finally have people in our White House who are like on the side of love.
Yes.
You know, and hopefully we're going to get some more stimulus checks out to people and that we're going to get the vaccinations out faster and just, you know, so many things that need to happen for this country. And there's like hope now that can happen.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, like we said, go check out our website, www.helloandgoodbyepodcast.com. Find us on Instagram at helloandgoodbyepodcast, @ Leanna Joan, at the real Jared Rodriguez. We're on Twitter at hello_by_pod, and rate and review on Apple Podcasts, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.